All right, thank you for joining our panel discussion today, where we're going to be taking a look at the U.S. Pavilion Riverfront Park project located in Spokane, Washington, and how the team leveraged progressive design build to facilitate flexibility and innovation, resulting in an award-winning project. The panel today consists of representatives from the owner, the design build team, the contractor, and the owner representative. Participating in the panel is Garrett Jones, Director of Parks and Recreation for the City of Spokane, Clancy Welsh, President, Garco Construction, Keith Gomez, Managing Principal, NAC Architecture, Guy Michelson, Principal, Berger Partnership, Matt Walker, Vice President, Hill International Spokane, and I'm Andrea Fry with Hill International, your moderator for today. Before we begin with the questions and panel discussion, we're going to start with a video of Riverfront Park U.S. Pavilion to set the stage.
It's so quiet.
You know, no music?
I love that shot.
How do they do that?
As you can see from the video, the U.S. Pavilion is a very unique and special project. Garrett, representing the owner, can you please begin with a brief description and overview of the city's vision for the pavilion?
Well, thank you, and we're honored to be here today to talk to you about this great project. The team that you're going to hear from today, I mean, it's the A-team. This was unlike any other project that I've been involved with the city of Spokane or around this region. And there's a lot of history about this site and pavilion, and it really started pre-Expo 1974. And so you can see in this photo, the pavilion set right in the middle in an island. And we dealt with a lot of challenges of how do we bring people to an island? And we really started at Expo 74 and those city leaders that brought the World's Fair to this park. And this became really our iconic piece, just like the Seattle Space Needle. And over time, after 1974 and Expo, we transitioned into what we call it today, Riverfront Park. And you can see in these photos that the full pavilion itself was sheathed, and that was only meant to be a temporary structure. And over time, it was a temporary structure. And as the park evolved through time, it cluttered, almost like your personal garage. You know, you have a 3-bay garage, and over time, you don't have that 3rd bay anymore. And we really lost that identity for the pavilion. And it was to nobody's fault, but it was really to try to find that niche of what was going to bring the community into the park. And one of our very broad priorities to give the design build team, because a lot of the answers were unknown, but one of the big ones, how do we create this structure, this pavilion, the gathering place? How do we create people to come into the center of the park on a Monday, Tuesday, Saturday, Sunday, or a large event? Within this structure, we really wanted to create what does it mean to host large events, small events, concerts, graduations. So a Swiss Army effect that really didn't give a lot of guidelines to the design build team. The other was, what is that wow factor? We wanted a wow factor, whether it was the resheathing or something that was using illumination to bring people from the region into the center of the park. And so with that, that was just the general ideas of reimagining what this facility and pavilion, this space could look like in the future.
Thank you, Garrett. Matt, you were with Hill International, the owner representative for the project. Why was the progressive design build delivery model selected, and what value did it bring to the design and construction process?
Thanks, Andrea. We basically had 3 primary reasons why we went progressive design build. The first one was, as Garrett described, the scope. Very unusual project. You know, most of the scope was focused on the structure. Basically, the program was, we issued the program in the RFP and basically said, design us something amazing that will bring people into the park again. So it was very performance-based. Some of the goals that the park board wanted was they wanted lantern or illumination, they wanted projection, they wanted some weather protection and shading. And we also left a provision for what we called enhancements, which was, we left it open to the design build team to come up with some ideas on how else we could achieve that goal of drawing people into the park. The second reason why we went progressive design build was because we wanted a highly collaborative and creative design build team on board from the onset. We didn't want to go through a pre-design process and then have some sort of bridging documents and transition to the design build team. We needed that design build team on board to help us with programming. And really what it became was a process of discovery, of trying to figure out what do we really want? We need your help to get there. The third reason why we went progressive design build was because we could set a GMP for a guaranteed maximum price for the project from the onset. When we issued the RFQ, we gave the GMP in the RFQ documents. We basically established that price right up front. That took the risk off the Parks Department, because we knew that ultimate cost level we couldn't exceed. But we also had flexible scope involved, which allowed the contractor, the design build team, the ability to not necessarily provide every last little thing we wanted. We had to work as a team to figure out what we prioritized, what we wanted to keep and what we couldn't keep. So that took some risk off the design build team. So all told, those 3 reasons really boiled down to giving us a ton of flexibility in solving this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question is for the design build team. The scope of work identified in the RFP was very performance-based. What were the major design and budget challenges, and how did the team overcome those challenges to create this award-winning project?
As both Garrett and Matt mentioned, the scope really was very performance-based. The criteria was vague, it was ambiguous. The city used words like illumination, celebrate the river, performance spaces. There wasn't really a program. There was no definition of spaces or square footages. And as both Matt and Garrett said, this was really intentional. There was no precedent for what you do to renovate a 1974 US pavilion. The city didn't know the outcome, and they didn't want to prescribe the solution. They really wanted to use the progressive design build process to allow the team and our creativity to address the scope and develop the best possible solution for the project. And that solution is one that no one had really envisioned at the outset. As you can see in this photo, the pavilion had always been a very iconic element on the Spokane skyline. But once you got closer to the pavilion and got inside, it wasn't iconic at all. Actually, kind of a little bit of a disappointment. Over the years, all kinds of things had been added to the pavilion. The carnival rides, there's an ice skating rink, a museum called the Spokane Story that lasted for a few years, mini golf, an IMAX theater. All of these things had been added to the pavilion to try to make it a more interesting place, but it was all with kind of marginal success. One of the ideas that we started with in the process was to really strip out all of these additive elements and eliminate the noise. We wanted to get back to the purity of the pavilion cable net structure. Nothing but net is one of the things that we said. Early in the design process, 4 design concepts emerged. And these are concepts that we kind of stuck with through the whole process. River connection, as Garrett described, the pavilion was on an island surrounded by the river, but there was so much clutter around the pavilion that you didn't even know that you were near the river. Illumination, you know, the idea that illumination could be used to express that iconic form of the pavilion cable net structure. Shade. Originally, our ideas for shade were very literal. We were just trying to figure out a way to block the sun. But ultimately, the solution that we came up with was much more artistic. And finally, elevation. We wanted to create a way to get up closer to the cable net structure, take advantage of the views across the park, to the city, to the river, and to the hills beyond. The pavilion really needed to be, we felt like, an integral part of the park, a place where the community would want to go and just hang out on a Wednesday afternoon. But also the best place to go for a concert, the best place in the inland Northwest where you could experience the concert and the light show that Guy will show on the next slide.
Ooh, smooth transition. Well done, Keith.
Thank you.
Amazing. Wow.
So really just an amazing place with a great place to hang out and gather and take in any kind of, any number of events, including concerts. So like I said, throughout the process, the vision kind of wandered around a little bit, but everyone was really faithful to those 4 concepts. And as the design developed, those concepts got better, even better than we imagined at the outset. Mm-hmm. So those 4 concepts, the river connection, again, here you can see with a little bit of the noise removed, the pavilion really is right on the edge of the river, and there are overlooks from the river at the edge of the pavilion, and views from the pavilion and the elevated experience really created that strong connection to the river and really changed the sort of the feeling of how the pavilion was part of the park. Illumination. Originally, some of the ideas that we talked about were basically like stringing Christmas lights on the cable net. And that idea evolved to what we ended up calling light blades. And I think we're saying we actually invented this this concept, but the light blades really highlight that iconic form of the pavilion and create a light show for events within the pavilion. Shade, the shade concept was still very literal, but created great patterns of both light and shadow within the pavilion, into the sky, and on the pavilion floor. And finally, elevation. This was the one additive element really that came about as part of the process, but we used structure that really fit the language of the pavilion and is very popular, super popular, both day and night.
All right, this is the smooth transition to me now. Kind of unpacking and expanding a little bit on some of the things Keith said. And I was reminded, Keith, as you showed the noise slide with all the amazingly wonderful things in their time, but that their time had passed, that the pavilion had been filled with. And we make it sound like, oh yeah, and then we just took those things out. But I think one of the lessons of this project is legacy buildings, legacy places like this that we have in our cities, they're actually empowered by their legacy, but they're also burdened by it, because every one of those decisions to remove a thing was not necessarily easy, and it wasn't easy with the public, because everyone loved the money-losing IMAX theater that they hadn't been to since they were in elementary school. The kiddie rides, everyone loved the kiddie rides they went on when they were kiddies, and it felt sad for them to go away. So there was some pain in that subtraction. Not from everyone, but enough that it was not an easy decision to subtract the noise. So a project like this is burdened by its legacy. So there is some challenge moving forward, but we were able to do that, but it was a challenge. And then the other thing, though, that beyond the 4 points that Keith talked about, was we really wanted to, and a huge applause to the city for letting this happen, which is to empower experience. And experience was the overall compass. And yes, we did elevation, but we did it in a way that was a cool experience, not just about being high, but like doing these gradings. And that this platform, you feel a little movement because it's steel. That adds to the experience, and it's super cool. Again, that idea of subtracting everything and resisting the temptation of, hey, what are we going to fill that space with? What's the next thing we're going to put in there? Again, it was a hard decision to say the next thing is going to actually just be more park, but an absurd and quirky and weird park underneath this absurd and quirky structure. And really cool topography, and topography that I was in there yesterday watching kids roll down this. The topography is this super simple thing to create that is such a part of the experience now. And this all used to be largely flat. And then again, the fact that it comes alive with this whole other layer at night. It's better at night than it is in the day. Most places are not like that. Most places are designed with a daytime bias. This one has a wonderful nighttime bias. And it's just amazing. And then another one of the hard decisions was, oh, we want an amphitheater. It's very easy to say that. But we've all seen amphitheaters that 99.999% of the time they're not in use. And it's like, hey, there's a cool amphitheater. I'll bet it's neat when there's an event. And again, the whole team using that, what's the experience compass, we instead kind of turned that on its head and said, let's create an amazing space anyone wants to be in all the time. And if you make an amazing space, people will want to be there and it will welcome events. And it's worked really well. And then finally, we love these shots because it is exactly about experience, that Instagrammable moment. So cool. That's my fancy description.
If you haven't recognized by now, between Keith and Guy, their creativity is abundant. As the general contractor on this, one of the challenges that Andrea discussed early on was budget, and has always been a problem or an issue with Parks Department on some of their past projects. This project, and we really had these 4 design elements that Guy and Keith have been talking about. And one of the ways that we had tackled that from a budgetary standpoint is early on in the process, we created some target value design, as we call it, and really put budgets to each one of those design elements. So instead of dealing with one large lump sum budget, we targeted those design elements, established budgets for those, and then we worked towards those budgets. It was very beneficial for us to be able to break that down and to keep those within what our goals were. The other thing that was great about, and one of the beauties of design build and progressive design build, is that we had the opportunity when we came across and developed these light blades, we had the opportunity to move more money from our elevated experience, which we simplified, and by simplifying it, we reduced our overall cost of it by still providing the elevation of it. And the grade elevation, but we were able to put more into that, the illumination that we found more value out of. And that's one of the very beneficial aspects to this project and to design build on something that really doesn't have a defined scope.
Thank you. Clancy, the pavilion
Yes.
was fraught with unforeseen conditions and the potential to jeopardize the ability to provide the scope of work. How did the team overcome these challenges?
Fraught with unforeseen challenges. I think one of the things, first of all, is even some of that weren't unforeseen, but we knew that we were going to encounter, included contaminated soil. This island that we were on had been the site of a big burn, and so we had all sorts of contaminated soils that we really had two options how we dealt with it. We either capped it somehow, or we took it off site at an extreme expense. We came up through determining not to have a flat surface within, you can see in this picture. By creating that topography, we were able to actually utilize that contaminated soil, build up to 15, 20 feet worth of elevation near the existing ring, and then cap that with clean material so that we were really, it was a value to the project to have this material. And this wasn't just material from our site. This was material from 3 or 4 other parks projects that had been accumulating over the last 4 or 5 years. Garco, we're a local company. We've been here for generations. One of the picture behind me, one of the really neat stories about this is that when my father came back from Vietnam and finished and got his engineering degree, he came back to Spokane, and his first project back in Spokane was as a project engineer on the pavilion itself. And so he started our company in 1978, 4 years after the expo, and is still involved in the company. Hasn't been part of ownership for about 15 years now, but this was a project that was near and dear to him. So for us to have the opportunity to be a part of this was a once in a lifetime experience. We're a self-performer, so it did give us the opportunity to utilize our own workforces to address some of the unforeseen conditions that we ran into. One of them, which was rock. You can see in some of these pictures, you'll see some rock piles. We were planning on crushing the concrete from a lot of these buildings that we demoed, including the IMAX theater. So we were able to utilize that rock for some of our fill material as well.
You know, I'm going to chime in with a fun story that I love about this image because it shows the challenge is we did not know that topography like this was going to be part of our design when we started. The process took us there. And one of the neat things this shows is if you look at the outer ring, you can see the mess of other things that had been there over the life of this building. And it seems great. Hey, cool, dirt's cheap. Oh, by the way, we want to waste a bunch of fill in here. That'll help the soil situation. Sure, let's just lean it up against those walls. That sounds dynamite, except for the fact that those walls are all retaining walls holding pressure in. And so we couldn't just start to apply that same pressure going out. And so Clancy had to come up with a pretty ingenious way of how do we fill against the wall without putting pressure against the wall. And that to me was like one of the things, well, that was an example of having kind of the nimble solve it opportunities that this project gave us.
Thank you, Guy, for those comments. Garrett, there was significant public pushback regarding not covering the pavilion. How did the team and the Parks Department work to address the public's concerns and win them over?
You know, I think a lot of it started out with just the attitude of the overall design build team and knowing that we didn't have all the answers. We've never had all the answers, and that's a beauty of a public project. And with pushback comes opportunity. You know, if we didn't hear anything from the public, then we know that is there that buy-in for the public? And we heard a lot of comments, a lot of concerns. And so with that, we took that pushback into something that could have been negative and brought that into a positive. And a lot of it started with the 4 elements that the design team showed around river connections and elevation and illumination. And during Expo, when that fully pavilion was covered, you know, that conflicts with a lot of those design goals that the design build team was coming up with. And the design build process gives you the opportunity to pause and be flexible and be able to then have additional public outreach. additional public meetings, and that we were able to do that during this time of those concerns and questions. And then the real time that Clancy and Guy and Keith's team were able to do as far as budgeting, images of what it would look like for connections to the river, and giving the public those type of opportunities. And then around the budget, we couldn't afford to recover the pavilion if we wanted to. So it was something that it really led us into the covering became the illumination. The pavilion is covered by light now, and then strategically placing those shade sails in areas that not only are functional, but also artistic and fit in with the overall design. So can't thank the team enough to where we can go negative, but we took that energy into a positive that ultimately was a huge success.
I have to say, it was a challenge. It was a bit unsettling. We were on the front page of the local newspaper. It seemed like every week for a stretch of about 2 months. And it wasn't, a lot of times it wasn't super positive, but in the end, I think we won over virtually all of the opposition. And so far the results have been accepted and celebrated by the public.
Clancy, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was just going to say, it's kind of been said before, but the pressure and tension and all that political energy ended up converting into these light blades, which have won 2 international awards and a couple US awards. And it basically has created the cover and has served that purpose as cover as well.
I was gonna prompt us. I'm gonna go freestyle here for a minute, Andrea, because Clancy, there were a couple slides that people are probably wondering, what the heck is that? Do you want to mention the other little project? And Matt, you can probably address this too. Like, oh yeah, there was that other project too.
Yeah, one of the beauties of this project from a design build standpoint was that, and this was all part of a greater bond for the city of Spokane that was a parks bond. Our portion was probably 25% of that overall bond. But one of the other projects, which was really connecting the Riverfront Park from the north to the south, and the images that you're seeing now are what was designed as the Promenade, and Berger was the main designer of the Promenade itself. And so as we were working as a team on the design build site, we started to recognize that there was going to be some significant challenges with the Promenade project intersecting our project from a constructability standpoint. And so we started to work together to figure out how are we going to solve that. Ultimately, it was determined that it was best that our project incorporated the Promenade. We were able to save some money from what the original budgeted amounts were by continuing to work that project as a design build. And a lot of these aspects that you're seeing, a lot of these visuals were modified from the original design, partially because as we developed the use of the pavilion itself, the Promenade started to take on new meaning as well. And so to have Berger as part of the original designer on the Promenade and really the master plan for the entire park, and have them on our design build team really was a seamless transition to move this to design build.
Yeah, we increased the GMP by approximately $4 million to incorporate the Promenade into the scope of work. So and that was kind of, Clancy said, that was really beneficial constructability wise, and we did save some money doing that. So that was a great benefit to the overall project.
And I think I can't imagine this project and those 2 separate projects ever getting anywhere had they not been combined, because so here's a super cool event on the Promenade, exactly what it was designed to host. But what this tees up is there is a ton of infrastructure and future-proofing utility upgrades. It's not the sexy stuff the public sees or that we win awards for, but this is sort of the lifeline and the utility lifeline for the whole of the park. And so much was invested there. And these two projects were just, oh, I'm going to do it. That horrible thing that people do, like synergy. It was amazing.
All right. Thank you guys for going rogue for a second. I think that definitely was important information to share. So the next question I want each of the panelists to address from your unique perspective and your role in the project as far as the value that progressive design build brought. Let's start with Keith.
Sorry, what was the question there, Andrea?
What value did progressive design build bring to the project from your standpoint?
Well, I think, you know, as we've talked about, the project was really undefined and without definition. At the outset, it felt almost like it was a problem that would be impossible to solve. And I think if it weren't for the collaboration that was possible with the progressive design build process, and the way that allowed the solution to evolve throughout the design and throughout construction, we might never have gotten to the place that we are now. It just really allowed us to explore the options, understand the implications of these design thoughts and how they would be accomplished, and do it all within budget. I really think it probably was the only way to solve the problem, was using this progressive design build process.
Yeah, I'll jump in as the contractor. I think what a lot of what Keith is saying is this project really continued to develop as we developed the design. If this had been a conventional design bid build type of contract, I think we would have missed the mark on a lot of what we were trying to create and develop, and maybe we would have had success in a different manner. But I think we sold early on our 4 design elements, and we all know them all by heart now because of how often and how long we have dealt with wanting these 4 design elements to be as special as they could be. And really, through the entire design process, we were demoing and we were building as we were modifying. This picture right here is a great example. At one point, we had twice as many of our seat walls than we do in that we show here. We started to realize that created some occupancy issues and some other aspects that we wanted to create additional funding for. And so we reduced those, and we worked together as a team to do so. We had the transparency of what the costs were through that entire process. And so we were able to basically say, hey, this is how much these are a lineal foot. We've got to cut out 156 lineal feet of these in order to be able to do what we want to do on this next step. One of the things that's cool about this picture that you don't see is at night, one of the things we were concerned about was these aren't required exiting, and they're not required to be illuminated per se, these benches, but they have a rock, an illumination rock in them so that you can actually see them at night. And it's not very often that you see that because the lights are always on the blades, and they're create quite a bit of lighting themselves. But there's no way we would have been able to have been as fluid with both the design and the construction had this not been a design build project.
It's so cool to be able to say that we worked on a project that has glow in the dark exposed aggregate. That's yeah, it's pretty cool.
And it is a cool thing to see too.
So I would just say, from an owner standpoint, you know, coming into this was our first design build project that the City of Spokane Parks and Recreation embarked on. And I think for us, it came down to 3 simple words about the flexibility, coordination, and risk. You know, it really meshes well with the public process, and this being a public space, and how things evolve over time, and being able to have that coordination with all hands on deck at one time to look at solutions. And then the risk of the share of the unforeseens, whether it was rock, contaminated soil that we've seen on other projects, then add another once in a lifetime unique existing structure that we need to modify, work around, and being able to share that risk across the board and look at those solutions, and ultimately limiting that risk as much as we could. There is no other method that would have worked. And it starts too with Matt and Hill International. It was, Matt's wisdom and his expertise in this design build method that got us and the park board on board. And so it started really early on, and we can't appreciate, Matt's wisdom from the very beginning.
Well, thank you.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Another thing I was going to say, or something to add, I think, is that not only did it take a lot of evolutions to design these elements, but the owner was kind of changing the scope a little bit and creating more of a
tiny bit, just a tiny bit,
a large concert venue versus initially it was going to be more passive use in a smaller venue, but then it ended up becoming primarily a concert venue. And there was a lot of change that came during construction, where this team really worked really hard and did a great job of kind of trying to stay 2 steps ahead and working through those issues. And that could never have been done successfully. I mean, I guess it could have been done, but it would have cost a heck of a lot more if that was a design bid build project. So here again, the flexibility of being able to change gears quickly was very, very beneficial to the project and to the team.
Absolutely. And another question for each of you to address: what key lessons were learned, major takeaways, or kind of favorite little memory during the project?
Okay, I was paying attention that time.
Good job.
I think we've talked about this a few times throughout this presentation, but I think flexibility was a big key. If we'd gone into this with a design bid build mindset, where we finish the drawings and then go to bid and start construction, we never would have got to this solution. It just would not have been possible. Our architectural team a couple of times asked, when are we going to be done with the drawings? And I told them never. We're not going to be done with the drawings until the project construction is complete. We just knew that the process meant that we were going to have to keep working and addressing the VE questions, making changes that evolved throughout the process, like the expansion of the event venue, like Matt was just talking about. But I think the great thing about that is that it always made the project better. And I think the fact that we went through that process, had the flexibility to allow it to always improve, that was a key lesson for us.
I think one of the key lessons, and this isn't just on this project, obviously it's on every project that we do, is you got to check your ego at the door when you're dealing with something to this extent. You got to take your contractor hat off, you got to take your architect hat off, you have to take your owner's hat off, and you have to work together, because you're going to have challenges through that entire process if you're going to go through and actually accept design build as your type of work that you want to do, because there are going to be challenges that you're going to have to face on every level of that. And in order to have a success of such proportion, you've got to be able to look at it from another lens. So I think that's one of the lessons that not just this project, but any project. I would say one of the other things that Andrea said was what was, a defining moment. We spent a significant amount of time developing these light blades. We used technology to be able to see what we would be able to do with it from a programming standpoint. We changed the original. We had multiple prototypes of this before we were able to determine, or to finally solve the design and constructability issues. The first one that we had weighed 8 pounds per lineal foot. We didn't want to put more than 1 pound per lineal foot on this. So we finally got to that point. All that being said, I'm still sitting there going, if we put these light blades up and they fail and they don't look right, where am I going to move? I've lived in Spokane my entire life. So that night when we fired them up and we saw the beauty and the shock and awe of the community that, as they were watching, was one that, you know, I'll remember, you know, forever. And I went down there with my old man, sat across the way, and watched as they were turned on, and it was quite a moment.
And I think you nailed it, Clancy. It's the ego piece, knowing that we didn't all have the answers coming into this or in the process, because we all get invested in certain elements or certain concepts, right? That this is the coolest thing ever, and it constantly changes. And you know, me just as the one owner rep, there's a lot of other players too. We, you know, park board, city council, the mayor's office, the citizens, you know, of ultimately being that owner and having some of that buy-in. And so just having that mindset, you know what, we don't know what the right answer is. We'll get there, but we need to get there together, and always having that positive attitude as well. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of challenges on this project at different scales, but coming into it saying, let's find a solution. Let's find a way to say yes, figure this out, rather than saying, no, we can't do this, and just stopping there. So again, it's that flexibility piece too. I think it's so important.
Yeah, and just to add to that real quick, Garrett, I think the star of that really was Berger and Guy in particular, because when we first were about presenting what we were going to look at doing, we talked a lot about absurd topography. If you look at Berger's website, you see some amazing landscape solutions. This looked completely different in a lot of ways from a landscape standpoint, and at every level, Guy worked as a teammate to say, we don't need that, you know, we can do this. And so we simplified the landscape of this. And I think it's one of the greatest, you know, I mean, it maybe doesn't look like all of their landscape projects, but the simplicity of it really was a success for our team.
I think another lesson learned, so to speak, was you got to pick the right team. During the procurement phase, we had 3 teams that shortlisted, and this team by far stood out as being the most creative and imaginative, and the best chemistry that we worked with when we met with them in the proprietary meetings. So it was key to make sure we had the right team, and we picked the right team. I mean, you guys had a cable tensile expert from Germany. You had an artist from New York. You presented some ideas that just blew us out of the water. And we got so excited about those that we basically said, this is the team we want to work with. So pick the right team.
Thanks, Matt.
You know, I got to chime in with one thing too, which is as a designer, we like to design really cool things, and those things come with an expense. And you know, cost cutting became value engineering. And then sometimes I'm increasingly trying to draw the difference between, like, let's not just call cost cutting value engineering. If it's truly value engineering, it's really saying, where is the value? What do we want to invest in? This project nailed that. And I just want to point out, I love this picture because there's that nutty, crazy sidewalk in the sky. It is not addressing a problem. It was an opportunity, and everyone clung to that. And the same thing with the light blades. And I think on so many projects, there's always the cost-cutting easy buttons to hit, which is, that looks fancy, we should cut it. And instead of taking that direction, it was, how do we maintain that experience, but how do we distill it down to what matters? And yes, we are going to cut some things along the way. And as a landscape architect, as any designer, that's hard because you fall in love with the things that you've designed. And you need to do that to advocate for them. But you know what? There's a ton in here that got cut, and at the time it was hard, I won't lie. But now as I walk around this park, I did last night, not a single thing is missing. We valued the right things in this project. And then in the end, that is a credit to the client who let that happen. It's a credit to Matt Walker, where'd that come from? Matt and Lorraine at Hill for doing this amazing job. I don't know, team. And the team includes the client and it includes the project manager. Everyone was rowing in the same direction.
Absolutely. Garrett, as the owner, how do you define success for this project?
You know, first off, I'm a little surprised the other panelists haven't said that City of Spokane Parks is the best owner they've ever worked for. But
Said that.
okay.
That's coming.
You guys are done
It's
with your
coming.
bond.
Yeah, exactly. Success comes in many different fashions. And I think that's why us in this profession need to pinch ourselves a little bit, because we have the opportunity to alter and change and improve the built environment for all to enjoy. And success for us comes in different ways, from just a date night on a Saturday night, a couple going in after dinner into the park to just look up at the lights and take a walk. It's to the success is every news channel, the Pavilion now is in the background, or we see it in the newspaper. Every little minute detail or event that's happening in the Pavilion now it's headline news. The success is people running and exercising and kids rolling down the topography like Gaia was mentioning. And the success is the smile on the faces that have no idea what the challenges were, the budget, the constraints. Come in there and enjoy, lay down on the grass on a Wednesday night. I mean, that was one of the huge goals. How do we activate this on a passive night? And to see a handful of folks and our citizens laying down and chatting and picnicking. And here's just an example of some of those great, it's really made that, again, like the Inlander says on that top left, it's iconic again. And that's pretty amazing to have something that is iconic and then 40 years ago, but then now has just as much strength or even more than it did 40 some years ago.
Absolutely. So before taking your questions, we're going to show another quick video of the Pavilion grand opening, really showcasing it as a central gathering place for our community. If you haven't done so already, click on the bottom of your screen and enter your questions into the Q&A box.
Goosebumps every time.
That just shows you need a good bubble machine for any successful party.
Absolutely. So now we're going to open it up for Q&A. And the first question we have is, the light blades are very cool. What is the anticipated life cycle of them? And how does the city of Spokane perform maintenance on such a one-off item that can be difficult to get to?
Who gets to answer that?
Where's our electrical engineer when we need him?
Yeah, we need the lifespan. What's that, Clancy?
Yeah. Well, I'm retiring in 12 years, so at least 12 years, I would assume. A couple things. We designed these. They're different. That the equipment is all on the ground from a standpoint that's accessible from the controls and the head end gear. So anything that we might have to address from that standpoint is on the ground. We ran it, and I think there are 6 different motors that basically run these on the ground. We also, at the time, we made an additional 15% for stock purposes in the event that we had failures. It does require a 125-foot lift from the floor to the top. We've got that cost built into, at least understanding from a maintenance standpoint. Overall, these are LED lights. The acrylic material that we use that actually really transfers and develops the light itself is a very durable product that we went with an additional thickness on that in order to make sure that we had at least a 20+ year lifespan out of that. And so, we expect it to be 20 years. The maintenance has not been next to nothing at this point. And the other thing is with the LED aspect, from a overall cost standpoint for the owner to operate, it's been pretty minimal from that standpoint.
And you can see the picture behind Clancy as well. And if there is something that goes wrong, we want him to get up there like his dad was in 1973. Exactly. But no, great question. And the maintenance was always a consideration too with our park board. And we actually spent a little bit extra money with Garco to make sure we set up a maintenance plan or to give us guidance, because the last thing we want to do is have a lot of deferred maintenance with a facility that's going to take away from other capital or other recreation programs down the road. So that was a lot of sensitivity there to make sure it was very easy to maintain.
Yeah, the light blades themselves are actually very simple. I mean, it's just a piece of plexiglass with that's edge lit by LEDs, and the LEDs. We don't really know what the lifespan of LEDs is right now. They're supposed to go on forever, but again, all the parts that might have the biggest chance for problems were on the ground, like Clancy mentioned. So blades themselves were fairly simple.
Yeah, I don't think they're plexiglass. I think it's a high-end acrylic product that we ended up going with.
I saw you buying stuff at Home Depot for.
Well, that was just for the extra stock. That's the 15%. Hopefully, we don't have to use those.
I want to piggyback something on here though, as a designer, that I think is a really cool lesson here though, which is the light blades. We wanted to call them lightsabers, but we thought we'd get sued by Lucasfilm and Disney. The lightsabers are amazing, and but there is a recognition and of, okay, there's a risk there because this is something new that hasn't been done. It's innovating. And what I like is that, and I don't know if we mentioned this, but Garrett and the Parks Department are the best clients ever in the history of that project. And but like, kudos to them for solving the problem and not just running scared from, this is innovative, we haven't seen it before, we don't have a picture to look at, we don't have a track record, so we're going to take that risk, but we're going to manage that risk by figuring it out. And we're not just going to be like, that's risk, I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole, because if this thing were covered with just little Christmas lights, it would not be as cool. So risk, reward. If you take a risk, just be thoughtful. What is the risk and how do we manage and mitigate it? Don't be terrified of risk, just be thoughtful about it.
Yeah, Guy, when we had that first prototypical monster that we brought in and we let him play with it to turn the colors, we had him at that point.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was done deal.
Yeah. We had this sort of tense meeting related to cost. And then Clancy turns on the first light blade prototype and everyone is like they're at Disneyland and it's the Main Street Electrical Parade, and ended up being the best meeting ever. It was great.
Well played.
Awesome. So the next question is, what advice would you give an owner considering doing their first design build or progressive design build project?
Boy, from an owner standpoint, I think is establishing a team before the RFQ, before the RFP process, and that team, established for us was Hill International, to have that wisdom and really around that procurement and help us draft the RFQ, help us draft the RFP. We had an attorney that specialized in design build that worked closely with us, because it is a different process and you can get scared of that in some cases, but hiring that kind of program management team from the very beginning really helped us guide us through this process. Now, the next design build project, we don't need Matt anymore because we're experts now. No, but you need to have that team from the very beginning. Just going into it blind is difficult.
I would say too, another thing you can do is talk to some owners who have done progressive design build or design build, and get their input and feedback from them. That's generally very helpful when you're starting out. Of course, call us if you have any questions.
All right, and another question in now from John is snow and ice buildup on the exposed blades and cabling a concern?
It was a concern as we were starting to look at what we were going to use from a material standpoint, but actually the LED lights don't give off any source of heat. So we don't have a scenario where we can get that temperature differential between them. The biggest issue that we have come up with, or that we've had to address, and it was basically by our connection, was wind. Wind has been, has moved the blades, because some of those blades, while they look, they don't look that significant. I think they're 16 inches in width on those, so they do create a little bit of a blade from that standpoint. Other than that, wind, or excuse me, snow is not a concern from a temperature standpoint, any more than the cables themselves.
All right, and it looks like we don't have any other questions. So I just want to say thank you so much to each of the panelists and your firms for participating in the panel discussion and making this project such an incredible success for the community. And thank you to all those who attended. I hope that you learned some valuable information about progressive design build and consider it for future projects.
And visit Spokane.
Yep.